Hi, this is Steve with Left Shore Construction, and today we're going to talk about repairing and refinishing an old lath and plaster ceiling. Most of these old ceilings have cracks in them, maybe some loose spots. Other contractors will tell you have to take it all off and replace it with drywall or overlay it with drywall, and that's really unnecessary, and it's very time consuming and messy and can tie up your room for up to a week. We're going to have this ceiling done in approximately 6 hours. I have 4 of us here doing it. I could do this by myself in 2 days, but we are interested in just getting in and out in less than a day. That way the homeowner isn't having their living space taken up for a long time. Right here around the brick chimney, what's happened is they had a roof leak, and if you look up close, you can see all along here where it's cracked, and it's actually much lower than the rest of the ceiling. That's because it's loose, and you can push on it and it moves. And anywhere where it moves, it's broken off the keys from the wood lath. And so you have to take this off and replace that particular section. And so that's what we're going to do first. And how you take this off without actually knocking down the whole rest of the ceiling, because that's pretty easy to do. How I do it is by taking a razor knife and I scar a line just over and over again. What that does, it separates the good stuff from the bad stuff, and you can knock off the bad stuff and the good stuff will stay there. You can use a grinder, works way better than a razor knife, but it's really dusty and messy, and I don't like working in that much dust, so we just take a knife and scar it over and over and over again until it's separated. Once you get the loose plaster off, the first thing you want to do is apply this plaster weld. This is a bonding agent. Put it over all the old wood lath and especially brush it up against the edge of the old plaster. All the materials you're going up against are really dry, and when you apply new plaster to it, what will happen is it'll pull all the water out of the plaster before it sets up, and that'll create a bond separation. And so you can actually have sections that will come loose and it'll crack and things like that. So I recommend doing this. You can use water. I don't like water because you have to be right on top of it. You have to get back to it. You know, get just the right saturation point. That way when you come back to it with plaster, it's still moist. This you can put on today and come back tomorrow and put the mud on if you want. This is a diamond lath. You can find it at any Mason supply store. Most of your home improvement stores carry it. It makes it to where you're not relying on the wood lath for the ceilings. A lot of times I'll go right over the wood lath, but on ceilings I screw this through because the nails tend to work themselves loose. Sometimes the wood is compromised and things like that. And so if you screw this over the top right to the studs, then you know that your plaster base is actually secured and it won't come off again. In order to install this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use tapping lathing screws. Anytime you use a regular wood screw, what it does is it actually pulls the wood apart, which works great if you're working with new wood that's still moist and flexible. But when you're working with old wood, it's really dry and tends to want to split and come apart when you put screws into it. And so this screw here, it pre-drills a hole for you. Anytime you see carpenters working on really old buildings, they a lot of times they won't use nails. They actually pre-drill holes and use screws, just for that very same reason, is because when they get in there and they start putting nails or screws in it, it breaks the wood. Once we get all our patches prepped and ready, we use this product called Structolight. Structolight is a plaster base designed to go on to any kind of depth you want. It's really easy to work with. By itself, it sets up in 3 to 4 hours. And since we don't have 3 to 4 hours here because I'm going to be done in one day, we add this, which is calcium sulfate. Calcium sulfate, a lot of plasters call it agricultural gypsum because that's what it used to say on the bag 20 years ago. And they quit calling it agricultural gypsum You can use cement as something to set it up with, but it takes a lot more cement, and I just prefer to use this. It's a little harder to find though. So if you can't find it, there's always cement there. And what I do is I take, this is my measuring cup for calcium sulfate, and I put like a full pan scoop of it into a 5-gallon bucket, and that sets up the plaster in about 45 minutes. Mix the material, we'll apply it over the ceiling into the deep areas and trowel it down as flat as we can. So next, what we're going to do is we're going to prepare the whole ceiling for our final coat, our finish coat, which the finish coat is a 2-coat process. And before we do any finish on the ceiling, I'm going to take this product right here. It's called Super Crack Stop. It's a self-adhesive mesh, and I'm going to lay it over the whole ceiling. That way, anywhere where it's cracking, this will span and bridge the cracks, and you shouldn't have any future problems with cracking through again. The only place I'm not going to put it in the beginning is over the patches, because it won't stick to the patches. And so we'll cut around the patches with this, but then once we start plastering, we'll actually apply this mesh with the first coat of plaster. And once that's done, we're back to the plaster weld again. We're going to paint the whole ceiling with plaster weld. Anytime you go over an old painted surface, you need something to help the plaster bond. Otherwise, it might just fall off later, and this stuff seems to work really, really well. I've tried it without using the bonding agent, and sometimes it stayed, and other times I had a whole house, all the ceilings fall down once because I didn't use bonder. And so I recommend you find it and you put it on before you start. Most of the cracks you see in a plaster ceiling are mostly cosmetic. It's just basically because the building's moved and shifted a little bit over. I mean, this house has been here almost 100 years, so it's moved. And so you get these cracks, these hairline cracks all over the ceiling. It's not a big deal. Once the ceiling is all completely prepared for the finish coat, we're going to put on a first coat of, once again, structolight. It's a leveling coat is what it does. It just sort of evens out the whole ceiling. And it doesn't need anything special. We're just mixing, once again, structolight and calcium sulfate, and we're putting pretty much a scoop of calcium sulfate in there because we want it to set up pretty fast. Because the finish coat, it needs the first coat to set up before you put the finish coat on. It helps a lot. What happens is the finish coat is a sanded finish, and if you come back to the second coat of finish too early, you'll basically push the sand right into the first coat, and when you're floating it, it will come out as a big flat spot in the ceiling. And if you come by too late, the first coat will be too dried out, and it'll pull all the moisture out of the second coat, and you won't be able to work it. Once everything's all ready and prepped, we're back to using this structolight, and we mix it with a sand. Sand comes in different grades. What we're using here is a number 30, is what they call. It's a graded sand. It's essentially what they were using when they originally did the ceiling. I know it doesn't look like that now, but now it's got about 1/8 of an inch of paint on it, and the paint changes the texture quite a lot. And so we're going to bring it back to what it originally looked like, and which is actually a really nice looking finish. And so we mix about 1/2 bucket of structolite with about 1/2 bucket of number 30 sand, and that's our final coat. In that, once again, I'm using calcium sulfate, but now I'm using maybe 1/2 a pan because it doesn't need to set up nearly as quickly, and the first coat of finish actually will cause it to set up a little bit all by itself. We started at 8 a.m. It's now 2:15 p.m. The ceiling's been repaired, recoated, refinished, and it should last another 50, 60 years. If you have any questions about the details on this, feel free to ask them in the comment section, or you can email me at office@leftshoreconstruction.com. Thank you.